Alright, welcome back to another Art of War 3 replay. I'm your host, John Cena, and today we're going to be doing a clan 2v2 battle. I'm going to be the orange player, and my partner, Skinnbones, is going to be the purple player. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to be facing off against two Confederate players. Let's see how it pans out. We got some early action happening around the battlefield as we try to secure those early game containers. We can see on my end, I'm actually not doing a great job securing those resources. The green player is getting more of those resources than I am. Meanwhile, Skinnbones is getting a nice scout onto the blue player. We can see blue players getting some infrastructure down. We can see that the green player is now teching up to HQ2 and has some basic infrastructure down as well. So we can see that I'm getting a 4th and 5th supply center down just to upgrade my infrastructure. Meanwhile, looks like Skinnbones is already teching up and is going for an HQ3 build now. So I tell Skinnbones to actually move his infantry over to get a scout. We can see that the green player is just starting to tech up to HQ3. I'm just starting to tech up to HQ3 as well. Skinnbones, meanwhile, just finished teching up to HQ3 and is going to put some infrastructure down for production. And so my plan for this is to go for a ground army. So I'm going to tell Skinnbones to go for some aviation. So I just finished teching up to HQ3 there. We got a hammer from Skinnbones getting some scouting on the middle of the map. We can see a fortress from the blue player. That's going to get cleaned up by the hammer. This hammer is going to get cleaned up though by some ground troops from the green player. And we can see that there's some riflemen from Skinnbones doing some patrolling there to deny scouting. Cyclone coming in from the blue player, and this Cyclone's going to get a nice view of my base here. I'm going to go ahead and drop an anti-air tower just in case, and I'm going to start to produce a Typhoon or two. Skinnbones is going to scramble his Vertex, and is going to take care of a scout in the back of his base. And he's going to bring the Vertex over, and the Vertex is going to clean up the Cyclone in the back of my base. I'm going to drop down a couple more production structures here. And my plan for my ground army is I'm going to go for a mass hammer army and mix in some Typhoons. Looks like Skinnbones is now getting a hammer into the blue player's base. Let's see what the blue player is up to. Looks like blue's got 6 supply centers, HQ3, and some infrastructure down. And it looks like the scout onto the green player. We see that green is going for an airfield and an avia factory. So we're probably going to see some Vertex come out of the green player in a little bit here. So meanwhile, I got some infantry trying to maintain some visual on the battlefield. But the Cyclone is putting some harassment onto my infantry. Skinnbones is actually just finished teching up to HQ4 and is continuing to grab resources on the battlefield. That's going to be nice for Skinnbones to continue to upgrade. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and upgrade my production structures. I'm actually going to upgrade my barracks just so I can get some fire assaults out. Vertex coming in for Skinnbones. I'm going to put some fire down on these tanks. Now we see a Zeus tank attempting to secure some resources there. I'm going to go ahead and move my troops in though after Skinnbones cleans up the Zeus, and I'm going to swipe that resource container. I'm going to go ahead and pull back now. I'm not quite ready yet to make a push onto the green player. Right now I'm just continuing to produce ground troops here. I'm going to go ahead and drop down a 3rd assault vehicle factory. Vertex is getting a scout onto my forces, and my Typhoons there are going to clean up that Vertex, no problem. Vertex from Skinnbones are now kind of making the rounds around the battlefield, scoring some hits onto some of the ground troops from the green player. In the meantime, I'm just continuing to produce ground troops, and it looks like Skinnbones is going to drop down some more buildings to further increase his base size and get some more production out. Meanwhile, Vertex coming in from the green player. It's going to score a couple hits, and they're going to get intercepted very nicely by Skinnbones. That's a direct hit onto the Vertex. Skinnbones is going to score another hit on the Vertex, and the Vertex goes down. So, meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and tech up to HQ4, and I'm just continuing to produce ground vehicles. Again, going for that mass hammer build. Looks like Skinnbones has finished an airfield. He's going to continue to go for that aviation build. He's got some ground troops though to accompany, and he's got a construction yard over the top of the cliff. That's an interesting move. We'll see what he decides to do with that. Skinnbones gets a scout onto the top of the cliff for the green player. We just see a bunker for visual from the green player. Skinnbones is going to do a little bit of harassment, and then he's going to retreat. So, just continuing to produce hammers still. I'm going to actually upgrade my special vehicle factory. Meanwhile, Skinnbones is going for HQ 5. It is dropping down a couple defensive structures. Vertex going into the air now. Let's see what Skinnbones hits. He's going to hit some units in the center of the map, and he's going to pull back. Looks like the blue player's got a defensive line set up with some Typhoons and Zeus tanks in the center. So it looks like at this point, we're just continuing to kind of build our ground forces up. And look at this. Skinnbones is deploying another construction yard. I think Skinnbones is going to go for a defensive building push. That's an interesting strategy. Looks like Skinnbones is decently confident in his ability to defend against both of these players, hence him going for this strategy. So I'm going to send a hammer to scout over here. We can see a cyclone from the green player, and we see a bunch of Typhoons coming in. And so I've got a ton of hammer tanks now. I'm going to actually move them onto the cliff for visual. And we see the Typhoon coming in now, and green is going to attempt to pull that Typhoon back. I'm going to go ahead and move my hammers now across the top of the plateau here. And we can see the green player has a handful of Zeus tanks around the container, large container. And so Zeus tanks for the green player are going to be able to secure some resources. Right now, I'm just making a push onto the bunker. I don't want to commit fully to an assault just yet. I'm just doing some harassment. I'm going to take out the bunker, and I'm going to retreat. Vertex coming in for the green player. Try and put some fire on my hammers, but it's going to get cleaned up by my Typhoons. No problem. You see another Vertex go down there. Meanwhile, Skinnbones using his Vertex to put some fire onto the blue player. And now I'm going to move my hammers up again. And I've got pretty close to full command points with my tanks. I don't want to fully commit here to an assault just yet. We can see a ton of Zeus tanks at the bottom here. And at this point, I accidentally did not micro these hammers properly. They got pulled into a direct engagement with the Zeus tank, and that was bad news for me. My hammer tanks got absolutely shredded in that engagement. Meanwhile, I got a handful of hammers at the bottom here. They've been able to secure that resource container, but I don't think they'll be able to hold it. Meanwhile, Skinnbones is making a push now towards the blue player's base, and he is dropping a ton of defensive structures and has a full ground army at the blue player's base. Meanwhile, this green player now making a big push onto the resource container. My hammers and fire souls are not going to be able to hold it. Look at this. This is a ton of defensive structures coming down now. We see a rocket tower and quite a few bunkers in the mix. And Skinnbones is supporting these defensive buildings with artillery and Typhoons. Meanwhile, on my end, I'm continuing to produce heavy armor on my side with Zeus tanks and lighter armor with the hammer tanks. Skinnbones is continuing to push with the Torrents and the Typhoons. They're raining down some good damage onto the blue player. Meanwhile, the green player is making a push with the Zeus tanks. I've got a couple of shield generators in the mix with these hammer tanks, trying to micro my hammer tanks as much as possible. But it looks like green's got a shield generator as well. It's not looking good for me. I'm losing hammer tanks. But meanwhile, Skinnbones is making the push still on that blue player, and it's not looking good for the blue player either. I'm actually going to retreat here off the plateau. Looks like these Zeus tanks are closing in on my base. I do not have the ground forces to defend, so I need to be careful here. Skinnbones, though, putting some great pressure onto the blue player. So I've got 3 shield generators, a couple Zeus tanks, and a torrent. Again, this is not going to be enough to fully defend against the green player. Looks like green's doing an attack move, though. I think that's a mistake from green. Green should have just tried to make a push onto my army. Here comes Skinnbones with the Vertex to support, though. These Vertex doing a great job dishing out some good splash damage against the Zeus tanks. These Zeus tanks are getting steadily cleaned up, while my tanks on the front line and Torrent with the shield generators hold the line. So in this case, what I'm doing now is, since I have 3 shield generators, I'm letting 1 shield generator run at a time. That way, when 1 shield generator is almost out, I can just activate the next one and let that first one recharge. And it looks like here between my ground forces defending and Skinnbones' vertex, looks like we're able to successfully push the Zeus back from the green player. Meanwhile, Skinnbones still continuing to push now steadily with these torrents, raining down heavy fire onto the blue player's forces. These bunkers and rocket tower providing some good coverage, and Skinnbones is making some steady progress here. So at this point, we're not concerned about the front line between purple and blue. I trust that Skinnbones at this point has got it in the bag with dealing with the blue player. On my end, I'm trying to support as much as possible in defending against the green player, and I'm just going to be producing Zeus tanks. These torrents are doing some wicked damage against these buildings from the blue player. Blue's going to need to have a response of some kind soon, or they're going to need to launch a counterattack of some kind. Meanwhile, I'm continuing to produce Zeus tanks, and my plan now is to go for a heavy armor build with an HQ4 army, and then make a push onto the green player's base. And we'll see how that pans out in a little bit. Skinnbones now moving more troops into the area. Again, Skinnbones not fully committing yet to a full assault. Here comes the blue player though. We can see his scouts from our side getting cleaned up. So it looks like they might make a push soon up the center of the map. And these torrents now starting to dish out damage onto the main part of the blue player's base. Not looking good for the blue player. Blue is under pressure. Meanwhile, here comes Zeus tanks from the blue player moving up the center, cleaning up another scout. And it looks like blue is committing to an attack through the center of the map here. Skinnbones is going to drop some more defensive structures onto the vicinity of the blue player's base. And Skinnbones is now going to move ground troops in onto the blue player's base. Blue is most definitely in trouble. Here comes Vertex from Skinnbones, and we can see there's a large ground army from the green and blue players. Looks like they're going for a combined assault onto my base. So I've got a couple defensive structures in progress being built, but they are not going to be finished in time. These Zeus tanks aren't going to clean up my buildings. So I decided to send my full ground army in onto the green player's base. We're going to attempt a base trade here. I definitely have a disadvantage in terms of the size of my ground army. Skinnbones though is putting on some irreversible pressure onto the blue player. We can see that Zeus tanks are dishing out some good damage against my base, but Skinnbones' Vertex are also dishing out some good splash damage. And meanwhile, my army is making a push now onto the green player's base. Green is taking some casualties, but is holding the line so far. These Zeus tanks, though, are getting cleaned up very steadily by the Vertex from Skinnbones. And I'm going to go ahead and move my shield generators to cover my tanks again as I continue to try and push. Don't have the firepower quite yet to push through. And we can see there's still a handful of Zeus tanks dishing out damage against my base, but I've got production structures in the back to make more tanks to defend. Looks like the blue player, though, is pretty much out of the game at this point. These torrents are relentlessly putting heavy fire onto the blue player. And we can see that at this point, I've only got a couple of vehicles left. It's not going to be enough to take out the green player. But we can see that at pretty much this point, the combined assault from the blue and green players has been cleaned up. Blue is going to lose their headquarters, and in this little bit here, Zeus tanks are going to come in from the green player to attack my forces. I'm going to go ahead and retreat here because I don't have the forces to push, but at this point I'm not concerned. Blue is pretty much cleaned up and out of the game at this point. So it's going to be a 2v1 if the green player decides to try and fight. So at this point, it's pretty much good game. I'm not too concerned again. We can see that I'm just continuing to make ground forces. And we can see that green is going to self-destruct. Alright, that's pretty much the end of the game. Hope you all enjoyed this 2v2 battle. We will see you in the next video.